Okay, so welcome back to the Sounds of the Baskerville. I'm James Flaherty, star of the show, The Hound. Chris Baskerville, good to see you again, Chris. How are you?
James? Very good, thank you very much.
To your own show. And then, so this morning we're very lucky to have Patrick Coughlin, who is CEO of Creditor Watch. Great to see you, Patrick.
Great to be here. Good energy in the room.
Yeah, employee number 2, is that right?
Yeah, well, there were three of us, so it's equal to.
Oh, so that title's kind of
That's right.
shared.
Yeah.
Right.
Last one standing, so I could say number 1 now, I guess.
Okay, you can now.
Are you the Stephen Bradbury of Creditor Watch?
You know what? Funny you say that, because there's a lot of long-term employees who do call me the Stephen Bradbury of Creditor Watch, so I'll take that one as well. Badge of honour.
Okay, and as an employer of choice, I imagine Creditor Watch being, of course, it's you get named for various awards and so forth. Now, you come to us this morning from the International Women's Day breakfast that you'd run with some of your team in Brisbane.
Yes.
Interested as we look at it as a CEO and leader of an organisation, as a young leader of exciting sort of business. I'm interested that the chief executive women put out a document, sort of say a little like last year, talking about that there's a real opportunity for women to step up and take a space, or if there's energy and ability left on the table by not having women better utilised.
Yeah.
We see something from the Australia Institute about as much as $3 billion a week of underpayment or differential payment between men and women. So in the context of all of that sort of unused talent that seems to be there, we're now hitting a situation where, and we've talked about this, haven't we, Chris, where you've got a perfect storm, as people say, about inflation's high, but it's really hard to find staff.
Yeah.
And then we've got this great unfixed, I think your Creditor Watch report, which you could talk to as we go, you've been forecasting what happens when the great unfix happens with all of the people going off. Saying we've got high inflation, costs going up, people's cash flow crunch for business. How do you as a leader, how do you get more women involved? What's the challenge to get and support women in an environment where we're all facing a crunch at the same time? It's a big question, but I thought it was put to us to sort of as 3 white males talking in a room. How do we? What's our job?
Yeah, from the 30,000 foot view, we all have to do more. I'm not only an employer of men and women, but I'm a dad to 2 daughters as well. So I'm a girl dad. So I think generally speaking, there's a huge amount of work that industry and business needs to do, and there's a huge amount of content out there that gets released, and there's really good narrative out there to support doing more. So I think I would like to think for women it's the best it's ever been, but hopefully it just continues to get better in the future, right? So the challenge is that there's still a mold to break when it comes to hiring. And I think what we're finding is there are certain industries that are still very old school in their thinking. And then there are newer industries that are embracing, the change a lot more. Now, I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of which industries, but I think everyone can agree on that. I think from Creditor Watch's perspective, it's always about hiring the right person. I don't think the right thing to do is go, we are going to hire a female for this position, but you have to be embracing candidates on the same level and understanding which is the better candidate to have. We operate in the technology space, and that's an industry that is traditionally, particularly in the development engineering space, dominated by men, right? And it's really hard to find any female candidates, let alone then hire female candidates. So that's just an example of one of the challenges. But then within our business, we've got a huge sales force as well. And I think diversity is great for any business. And obviously hiring women is part of that narrative as well, because if everyone is the same, then you don't get different ideas, you don't get different thoughts, you don't get different perspectives, you don't get different approaches. So it's really important to have that natural diversity within an organisation as well.
And I think it's about, isn't it about, it's not just the one day a year we talk about it. It's about the jobs being set up to allow people who mightn't be working full time.
Yeah.
That sort of, so some of it also would be about making sure that generally everybody's got the same opportunity to be a candidate for the right candidate for those jobs. Isn't that part of it? Is like
that's right. Everyone should have the ability to put their hand up, whether it's an external candidate or an internal candidate for a role, and have the confidence that regardless of who they are, their background, their gender, etc., it makes zero difference.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, and I suppose the context of this, Chris, is we were both at a conference last year where might have been, I think, Patrick, you spoke at that conference last year where there was probably 10 women in the room and about, nearly 200 people. So there are industries where there are some real challenges. So Chris, question without notice, where do you see your profession, getting opportunities for women into it? Is that on your agenda?
Yeah, best person for the job. I agree with Patrick in that regard. Yeah. And in liquidation number terms, like in terms of what's the gender of those that are registered with liquidation tickets, it's definitely very male dominated. I think I'm very fortunate to have a Melissa Lau in my office that female, speaks multiple languages, is a liquidator herself, expert in forensics. And it's nice to have that contrast to myself, I'm loose, she's OCD. I'm very laissez-faire, she's very rigid, and you kind of need the contrast and the balance there. And
you need that at every level as well.
I think
it's not
so.
Just sort of leadership, or board, or exec. You need that down in the trenches. Whether it's customer success, development. Doesn't matter.
And you're right. You need ideas, and that's interesting. It reminded me of a business mentor said to me, two people in a relationship should be opposites. Opposites attract. Well, that's the jazz. Because if you are both the same personality type, one of you is redundant. So, so put that in a workplace context. If everybody is the same, you've got a lot of redundancy in there. Yeah. Metaphorically speaking.
So we'll probably we'll move on to sort of where we are. I think it's really well. I think we've got access to the great research and insights that you can get from Creditor Watch. So let's just try and get as much out of it as we can, Chris. So
tell us about the algorithm and how that comes
to start really.
Let's go.
But I mean, I want to get people to the end of the podcast. Don't we? There's more coming up.
But what do they do? We do talk just to round off on the International Women's Day thing. We do talk a bit about sexually transmitted debt and the relationship between where you might have a husband and wife in a business that one person may not know or may not be fully aware of the risk that the other is taking and so forth. So that's one of the things to just keep in the mind as we look at the economy ahead and what people need to do about taking.
It'd be a great stat to be able to see where a small business goes under. It's generally, I would say, and you guys can challenge me on this, the male, the husband or the brother jumps off the board. The company goes into administration, and then he will start a new business that sounds very similar and walks very similar.
Walks like a duck, talks like a duck. Yeah, the old what we call the old phoenix.
That's right.
The old phoenix. So that's still out there.
And we've done episode of many on this. So Chris has done. We think about 2,000 case studies of different sort of how to run a business, how not to run a business. Holy cow, just what was that? So anyway, so this is part of what these podcasts is about. It's just trying to get some little insights or bits and pieces that business people or their advisors can sort of take away when they go, well, hang on, I listened to Chris or I listened to Patrick and they gave me this idea. So if people can come away with an idea from one of our podcasts, that's a win, isn't it, Chris?
Well, I was talking to a lawyer this morning and he was working for a firm called Phoenix Law. And I thought, that's probably not the name you want to be, or Phoenix Business Advisors are not the names you want to be using, because Phoenix in our land and our language is an indicia of some pretty yeah, let's just call it a fraud, which is shifting assets of one distressed company into a brand new company for very little money, and as the metaphorical bird burns to the ashes, it rises again. And I had a great laugh, and I said, just curiously, is Phoenix Law still around? And they said no.
It's Phoenix.
Yeah.
On that note of things burning down, Patrick, it's probably a good question. That what just happened? What is the risk report sort of shown you over the last sort of little while, since you maybe even take us back in time as to the thinking as to putting that out? I think it's a great service. What's it told you, and what are you starting to see?
So let's go back. So it's called the Business Risk Index. Plug it for a second there.
Yeah,
right.
go for it.
We release it every month, and we're looking at all sorts of insights from the number of insolvencies, payment defaults, even into sort of geographic probability of default, industry level, payment times, etc. And if we go all the way back to the beginning of the pandemic, if we can all go back that far, it's pretty blurry. I was certainly quoted plenty of times in the media saying, there's the zombie apocalypse is coming, and there's this cliff, and I think everyone in the industry just sat and waited, and it never came. And despite all of the indicators showing that we should be having massive numbers of insolvencies, they were all upside down, and it went the other way. And if we sort of skip 2.5 years of history there and get to sort of the last we all know what we were sort of calling that we'll start to see increases, and we've started obviously to see that. We're almost back at pre-COVID insolvency levels. Some industries already there, some are still behind, and we expect on a whole to go probably 20% above where we were in 2019. Construction, obviously in the paper every single day. I don't want to say unfairly targeted, but probably getting a little bit more airtime than others. But I think that's the nature of that business.
Construction historically, if you go back through ASIC's data and going back to 1999, because that's the extent of it, it's either one or two. Yeah, construction always.
It's the riskiest industry, and it's always got high profile numbers attached to it in terms of how much is owed and job losses and people not getting their houses built, and there's a real human element there as well. So it's important that it's reported on, but it's also probably reported on a little bit too much. So what we are seeing, yes, insolvencies are going up, payment defaults are going up. So that's a default registered by a creditor, a supplier against their customer or debtor. And that's kind of a precursor to a coming insolvency in the future. Court actions, quite flat, but somewhat trending upwards, particularly after 2020, 2021, 2022. And then looking forward, our algorithms, as we were talking about, are showing that obviously that there's going to continue to increase, which is kind of one of those Eric Banner or the moments that we love from Full Frontal. For those that are old enough.
I remember Full Frontal. He had a massive chin.
I have to put a link on it.
He had a massive chin, and then one day he uncovered it and it took down a plane because it was the flash of lights.
So I don't know what the demographics are of the podcast, but so it's certainly
friends, relatives. No, it's
going to be really tough out there for 12 months, and I think having spoken to quite a number of journalists and obviously CEOs and business owners and whatnot in the industry the last couple of weeks, it really felt for me, it was sort of 3 weeks ago that it was like, okay, it's here, it's finally bit. We've spoken about it for a long time. Interest rates have been going up, we've been waiting, and it was like a friend was made redundant, another friend sort of in a business that's in the market to buy businesses is just getting inundated with offers from business owners saying, please buy my business, otherwise I'm going to go under. And then, interest rates continue to rise. So it's pretty dire. And I kind of got called out during the, the middle of the pandemic for being too negative, which is really bloody difficult. So I do try to find a silver lining. And my silver lining is that, Aussie businesses are better prepared for a downturn than they've ever been. And the narrative from businesses is that a lockdown is far worse than a downturn. Okay, so they're operating lean. They've hopefully saved money or reduced their cost base. And if you think about that sort of second half of 21, when we went through that East Coast lockdown, everyone just sort of treaded water. There weren't mass redundancies, there weren't mass insolvencies. Everyone treaded water because they knew that the lockdown was going to come to an end, and we're just hanging out for that. And I'm quite hopeful, and this is my silver lining, quite hopeful that businesses are going to do that until we get some good news from the RBA. And I know that we're going to talk about the RBA at some point. And we're probably unlikely to get good news from them until they actually deliver it on the first Tuesday of a month, in the future, to say that, okay, inflation's under control. We can see a view to interest rates coming down, right? And then we'll get the investment and the hiring again. So that's my 2.5 minute read.
I like the silver lining there. But and I was one of the insolvency guys at the beginning saying this is going to be a train smash, because you got factories in China shutting down, everyone's going to lockdown. Totally. Now you got supply chain issues. It is impossible for Australia to not be impacted by all that. And we said train smash, tsunami, zombies. Yeah. What we didn't understand or what we didn't predict, and just so everyone knows, every one of my predictions did not come true. Yeah. So don't listen. Yet. Not yet.
Yeah.
Maybe we're 4 years.
Don't put a time limit on things. That's right.
The response from government was the unknown, and the response from government is ATO realises if they continue at the same full speed that they did pre-pandemic, you will wipe people out. So they go into go slow mode, and the government then injects a humongous amount of money to put that net in place for the economy. We didn't anticipate any of those two manoeuvres and look at the effect.
Yeah, and I think that's right. That was the thing that was going, but why not? Because we thought, well, maybe if it's not going to be a tsunami like the Japanese, the big picture with this. Yeah. Maybe it's going to be more like the tide comes up and then suddenly you're up like that. No, it didn't really do that either. It just didn't do anything. So then we sort of sat there, well, it's happening next year. But the point about zombies still is, and I think something a little bit about, you're saying the lean businesses, it's almost, I think it's probably something for perhaps our next session with you would be, well, who are you if you're that lean company? And if you're not, what should you do about it? Because a lean and smart company would be you. I mean, they'd have a tool like yours to understand whether their clients are going to pay them.
Yeah, working smarter.
Yeah, that's the sort of question, because the zombie was the company that still kept on living as the undead, because
that's right. I think they're like different types of
there are. This is without getting into sort of like Last Train to Busan and stuff like that. But
the way I sort of look at the insolvencies at the moment, and I might be wrong, but it feels like a portion of those that are going through the process probably should have gone through in the last 2 years or so. So they probably don't actually owe that much money other than to the ATO or the landlord and maybe a spattering of small stuff. But really they've either continued to operate really leanly, or they just really haven't operated at all, and they've abandoned the business and now it's going through a more formal process. So I think there's still a lot of analysis and wash through to happen in hindsight. But at the end of the day, insolvencies are going up. They will continue to go up for a period of time.
And we keep on saying, on the face of it, Chris, you often say, well, accountants go, oh, you've got nothing to do. Happy days. Chris has got nothing to do. Isn't that a perfect world? Well, again, that goes back to that point about trying to remove capital from a place where it's not being effectively used to putting it into the hands of someone who can do it better.
There's the concentration of capital and labour into better quality businesses is ultimately better for the economy. And this is a huge narrative in the technology world at the moment, is that there was so much free money available that you had a real dilutionary effect on good quality, product and developers who were across 100 businesses, where really they should only be across 50 businesses, right? So if 100 businesses do, struggle to get good quality engineers, then they're not going to be as good as they could be. So if you bring that back down to 50 businesses, all of a sudden we talk about talent density, talent depth is better. Capital going into those businesses is more likely to have
Be used efficiently.
used efficiently, and we have a virtuous cycle again. So there is another silver lining there. You know, just because money is essentially free doesn't mean you should go and start a business.
And that's like, we've often talked about that, haven't we, Chris, about whether, there's a thing I've stuck on my wall given to me which said, are you founder material? Like, do you have what it takes to actually run a business? So just because you've taken a package or you have got sort of sick of working in the workforce in a particular job doesn't necessarily mean that a call to run the next new tech startup and cool app, that's not everybody's path, because it is quite a lot of a risk running to business. And
my old man distinguished, he said there's two types of people. You got the entrepreneur and then you got the business manager, right? And he said the entrepreneur's job is to get you from zero to opening the doors of your business. And then the business manager's then got to take over once the doors are open to run the thing. Because too often we see the entrepreneur, you know, the dreamer, the blue sky guy or person, lady, gets the business open and then they actively manage it, but then they're the wrong person to manage cash flow, profitabilities and all that, because that's all the minutiae and all the ugliness that we don't want to deal with. You know, we're on to the next business adventure, you know.
Right, there's a fair bit to go on with that then, because if I'm a business owner, I'm going to be saying, okay, well, thanks, fellas, that's great. So you're telling me maybe I shouldn't be in business. Maybe the world's a bit uncertain. Okay, well, we knew the world's uncertain. That's kind of how it kind of rolls. But anyway, so, well, thanks, Patrick, for joining us. Let's see if we can, let's jump a little bit deeper into some of what you kind of see coming and some of the stats maybe and some of the experiences that we've seen. And Chris, thanks very much again. Sounds of the Baskerville.
Sounds of the Patrick Coughlin.
See you next week.
Thanks.